Rochberg the Progressive, Revisited. J. Reise argues in the 1980-81 Perspectives of New Music article, Rochberg the Progressive, that the characterization of George Rochberg as one who had renounced serialism and returned to tonality is one that is too simplistic. At that writing, only 8 years had passed since the premiere at Alice Tully Hall of Rochberg's Third String Quartet, performed by the Concord Quartet, which Reise describes as, quote, having caused a great stir in the music world, unquote. Even then, the repudiation of serialism explanation of the piece had so concretized in public perception that Reise apparently felt the need to set the record straight and bring attention to the piece's more progressive, technical tendencies. Perhaps a revisiting of the progressive tendencies found in the Third Quartet is more in order today than it was in 1980. Since then, two stylistic ideas have become inextricably linked with the now late composer, pastiche and neo-romanticism. A usual framing of the polemics of recent history casts a tyrannical serialist regime in the mid-20th century smothering the creative efforts of the non-compliant unorthodox with an ascendant experimentalism, e.g. minimalism, pastiche, and the return to tonality, that is, neo-romanticism, saving the day in the 1970s. Time magazine critic Michael Walsh describes Rochberg as, quote, an unlikely revolutionary, quote, who dealt the crushing blow to serialist orthodoxy, and describes the Third String Quartet as seminally neo-romantic. He also describes Rochberg's style as, quote, predicated on pastiche, quote. Such a framing of Rochberg's music from the Third Quartet onward is typical. The main problem with the narrative of Rochberg as toppler of serialism, embracer of traditional tonality, and champion of neo-romanticism is the inconvenient truth that Rochberg's Third Quartet is not actually a beginning-to-end, wall-to-wall exemplar of traditional tonality-embracing neo-romanticism. Nor is the term pastiche adequate to explain the seemingly incongruous aesthetic juxtapositions contained therein. Reise does an admirable job of showing how Rochberg's resolute commitment to advanced compositional techniques belies the facile repudiation of serialism summary of Rochberg's Third Quartet, despite the popular consensus. To be sure, Rochberg was repudiating something about the serialist zeitgeist of 1972. He called the entire 20th century unfortunate. But he proposed an alternative that was neither a conservative return to pure romanticism, nor a postmodernist anything-goes eclecticism. Rochberg himself retrospectively articulates his ideal in his 1984 book, The Aesthetics of Survival. Quote, at the outset, there was a strong sense that the two great languages of musical expression, tonality and atonality, had reached a point of high maturation beyond which neither could be pushed with any fruitfulness. Then came the sudden realization that each, if juxtaposed to the other in genuinely imaginative ways, might yield new forms, new meanings, and new values understood as complementarities. The name he gives to this ideal is ars combinatoria. My premise is that the label pastiche is not sufficient to describe a work of divergent aesthetic surface juxtapositions, if indeed the material within those juxtapositions is nonetheless unified at a deeper level of structure, as I believe is the case with Rochberg's Third Quartet. Stephen D. Block, a critic of Rochberg and of Reise, concedes the structural unification of the quartet, but says, quote, structural unification, alas, does not guarantee either a masterwork or even a significant work of art, end quote. Perhaps not, but before making such an assessment, I think it is only fair to discuss what those structurally unifying devices actually are. To begin with, we can find much of what we need to explain the technical content of the Third Quartet within the first measure. Building on Reise's observations about the consistent intervallic salience that permeates the first movement, I go so far as to put these into four nomenclature. The horizontal content of each instrument in movement 1, measure 1, is 0, 1, 2, 7, 4, 6, and the vertical content of each simultaneity is 0, 1, 6, 7, 4, 9. Much of the salient harmonic content of Rochberg's Third Quartet could be summarized as 0-1-X7, where X is 2, 3, 4, or 5. As a case in point, consider the entire pitch content of Movement 1, Measure 1 in an unordered, bottom-to-top amalgam. There are three different ways this amalgam can be shown to be a superimposition of two of the same 0-1-X7 sets. First, the amalgam can be shown as the superimposition of exactly two 0-1-3-7 4Z29 sets, 4Z29 being one of the two so-called all-interval tetrachords, with all pitch classes contributing. Second, it can be shown as the superimposition of exactly two 0-1-5-7 416 sets, with all pitch classes contributing. Third, it can be shown as the superimposition of exactly two 4-9 sets, 4-9 also being the content of each simultaneity in the measure, with all pitch classes contributing. It is worth noting that the four missing pitch classes, i.e. the complement, C, F, F sharp, and B, also comprise a 4-9 set. Two other 0-1-X7 sets appear multiple times within the amalgam, although not as exactly two superimposed, mutually exclusive sets in the manner of the previous three examples. In both cases, the set is quadruply present within the amalgam, with some notes contributing to more than one set. The first is 0-1-2-7, 4-6, and the second is 0-1-4-7, 4-18. One other tetrad superimposes itself exactly twice on the Movement 1, Measure 1 amalgam, with all pitch classes contributing, 0-1-4-6. While not a 0-1-X7 tetrad, it is the other all-interval tetrachord and shares an infinity with its Z relation already present, 0-1-3-7. There are many other places in which this collection of salient tetrads appear in the foreground, and this slide shows some examples.